The second session of day 3 of the VID conference. My name is Julia Steele, the creator and host, and we are joined by the wonderful Georgia Murch. I've known Georgia for a few years now, and she is the queen of feedback. And today we're going to be exploring her latest book, Flawsome. She is obsessed about how we speak to others and ourselves. She works with individuals to help them rewire their relationship with themselves so they're able to lead better, build deep relationships, and make clever decisions. She's worked in the public and private sector with clients for over 20 years, leading teams and businesses. Designing and facilitating culture change and leadership programs means that she's done the miles. She is featured in Sky Business, The Today Show, The Morning Show, AFR, BIW, News.com, The Huffington Post, The Age, The Sydney Morning Herald, The CEO Institute, Modern Business and Qantas Radio. She's the best.
Man, that's a lot.
Feedback and feedback flow, and is her self-confessed new favorite book, Flawsome. Round of applause, Georgia. It's so great to have you here. What
it's
a bio.
Nice to be here. I love what you're doing. And I mean, you did this last year as well and got us through the of COVID in the early days. So now we're in a new year, new themes, and I love it.
So tell me about this new book. Like, I love the concept of Flawsome, but let's be upfront. What does it mean? Where did it come from?
Yeah, what is Flawsome all about? So years ago, I had this, and I don't know about you. Well, I do know because you're always up for self-evolution. But I got to this stage where I kind of went, oh my God, I'm okay not being perfect. I'm okay having, weaknesses and not being good at everything. So when people ask me how I was, I'd go, I'm Flawsome. And, I just owned this word and I thought I made it up, but I didn't. Apparently it was out there beforehand. So I did some research around it, and Flawsome, the word, was actually inspired by Tyra Banks. You know Tyra, who was the African-American Victoria's Secret model? Yeah. So she was dropped from her Victoria's Secret modelling contract. Hey, Nosh, great to see you. I'm on the chat. I'm multi-skilling, trying my best. Anyway, she was dropped from one of her modelling contracts because she put on a few kgs. And so she decided, and it spurred her on to start the America's Top Supermodel, that show that has continued to get amazing ratings. But it was basically about celebrating people's flaws. So you can be a supermodel and have freckles or gaps in your teeth and not be super skinny. But then what happened was there was an article in the tabloids in the States, and the title of the article was America's Top Superwaddle, which is basically having a crack at her weight. And oh, the irony. But that really spurred her on again to make sure that we need to embrace our flaws. We need to get really comfortable with who we are and actually celebrate that. And so for me, Flawsome really means that it's not just accepting your flaws, it's knowing that without them, you wouldn't be you. Because the thing is that people are drawn to, not to your perfection, but they're drawn to your acceptance of your imperfections. And that's when we're easy to be around. So that's where the journey of Flawsome began.
I love that. And it's interesting how we all look at ourselves in different ways. When we were talking to Penny Lacasso yesterday, she was sort of like holding the mirror up to yourself and realizing that you can be happy just as you are if you're willing, if you accept what you see, if you're willing to accept what you see. And I know before I came to Australia, I went on a bit of a health kick and lost a lot of weight. But I lost so much weight that people started to say, you don't actually look like you anymore. And I was like, I can't win. Like, on one hand, I've got these curves and I lost a lot of weight, and then I started putting them, and then I got to a point point where people say, you don't actually look like you anymore. And they actually loved me how I used to be. So yeah, it's fascinating. So you're known for as the queen of feedback. Like as long as I've known, you've always been about
Thank you.
feedback cultures and fixing feedback, and having been in corporate for a long time, I know what good and bad feedback looks and feels like. But why did you write Flawsome?
Yeah, so traditionally, feedback cultures at work, or maybe even at home, but have been about giving feedback. So the push of feedback. So there've been lots of training around how we do that, or even, we've incorporated into our values behaviors, and we've created these amazing words, and we've got great font, and we stick it on our website or at the back of the toilets or on a mug. But it's still not transforming. Like, some of the words might be speak up, or speak the truth, or be candid. And I love all of them, but we're not necessarily seeing the transformation in the workplace. And the reason being is that the feedback's one-sided. It's the push of feedback. What we haven't been focusing enough on is how we receive it and how we respond to feedback that's coming our way. And when I'm talking about feedback, Julia, I'm not just talking about the words, I'm talking about information that we get from the world. And so for you guys listening, you can think about feedback isn't just, it's how somebody looks at you. It's you. Feedback for you is how you respond to information that you disagree with, or opinions that you don't like, or you're watching the news and you have a reaction. All your responses are feedback to you. And I remember reading this book, Thanks for the Feedback, about 10 years ago, by Douglas Stone and Sheila Sheen. Yeah, that's her name. And it was all around, for years we've been taught to give feedback, but actually what we need to do is learn to respond well. So that no matter how it's given, by who it gives it to us, in whatever format, we can learn to take and receive that well, and that will transform workplaces. And I love the concept, but I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's both. Because when we're resistant to it, when we push back on it, and when we are not open to it, we become difficult, not just for other people, but we become resistant to ourselves, and we fall into these traps of kind of like blame, denial. I'm so offended. And that creates its own ripple effect. So my kind of new focus in Flawsome was, how do we make peace with who we are? How do we receive feedback well? How do we choose to respond to things in a way that elevates us and elevates those around us, but be okay with not being perfect, and be okay with being who we are? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's giving and receiving, isn't it? Feedback. We do that every day, as you say, and it's not just us individually, it's in the workplace and it's in life. So, how do we reconcile, that? And I mean, it's so important that we are, able to give feedback, but also receive it as well.
So what was the question? How are we able to give it and receive it?
Yeah, why is it so important for us to reconcile it in work and life?
Yeah, okay. So as I said before, we've all got this ripple effect, which is the impact of who we are. And I believe it's really important for us to be aware of that, so that we can understand the connection that we make with others, or the disconnection that we make with others or with ourselves. So my daughter Holly, who's nearly 17, is one of my best teachers. So she triggers me all the time. So she can go from 0 to 100 in 1 second. And as a result, I can do the same. So I could blame her for my reaction. So if she didn't react so badly, I wouldn't have had to respond that way. Or I could blame myself and say, what terrible parenting, you need to step up, Georgia. That's not setting a good example. But the minute I fall into blame, I'm trapped. I can't learn anymore. And I'll give you another example. So at work, I don't know about you, Julia, but over the time, I have had some team members who haven't pulled their weight, or they just haven't been on the ball. And I can get frustrated with that, and I can, become annoyed and irritated at them for not pulling their weight. Or I can look at my reaction and go, okay, what's in there for me to learn about how I'm reacting, and how do I respond in a way that serves both of us, where we both feel respected? Or even you think about, like, you can crack it at your partner for not organising date night on Tuesday nights, or you can crack it at them for not packing the dishwasher properly. I mean, let's talk about the dishwasher. There is a way to pack the dishwasher, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. Are you with me? There is a way. Yeah.
Yep. There is, but totally in our house.
Yeah. But in those scenarios, all of those, the reactions that we have in those moments, they're our reactions. There's something for us to look at around why circumstances, people, scenarios are triggering us. And when we fall into this place of blaming other people for how we respond, or blaming ourselves, this world is uncomfortable now. Or we can move into, yes, I agree with you, Nosh, or we can move into this place of denial. That's the other dangerous place, where it's not my fault, I didn't do it, nothing to see here. And denial can be it's typically a blind spot for many of us. So I remember years ago, for years actually, I kept receiving feedback that I was intimidating. Like for ages, I can remember getting this. And I remember thinking a lot of the time, I am not intimidating. I am going out of my way to make people feel seen by asking them questions and responding in a really happy way. And I kept getting the feedback. And I got the feedback about 3 years ago that people that I really respected in our community, actually, Julia, that found me intimidating. And then I thought, actually, there's a theme that's going on here. So maybe for me, I have a blind spot. And then when I started looking into it, I went, yeah, I do. And I can be intimidating because I can be passive aggressive. But I didn't want to own it at the time. I didn't know how to own it, and maybe I didn't know how to see it. And so when we get good at accepting the things that we do, we can do something about them. But it feels kind of painful at the start. To receive that information about ourselves. But when we get better at going, yeah, I do that. Oh my gosh, how embarrassing, how awful, I'm ashamed. Don't be ashamed, learn from it. Go and make the apologies that you need to have, and understand why we fall trapped to these, because that's where we get the chance to change and influence how we lead, how we love, how we do friendships, and how we do life.
A lot of those reactions that you're talking about they almost feel like gut reactions or natural instincts. Like you say, sometimes we don't even know that we've done it before it's too late. So what can we do to sort of tune into some of that reaction, that response?
Yeah, because if you can't see it, how can you change it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've all got, and I'm sure on lots of the conversations that you'll be having over these 21 days, Julia, people talk a lot about our fight or flight reactions. So, and it's basically when we're in stress. So when we feel stressed or anxious, our body naturally has a response. So let me just say, that makes us human. That makes us normal. If we didn't have reactions to things, we'd be robots. Or maybe we would have reached enlightenment. But in order to get there, we've got to meditate for bloody hours. We might need to go to the mountains for days, spend time with just ourselves. And that's not practical in the world that we're living in. But the more time we spend understanding our reactions, the easier over time it is. So let's not be scared of those, firstly. Let's look into them and understand them. I think that one of the interesting things is that we associate feedback as stressful, so the receiving of it. So Julia, have you been in a situation, or maybe the crew who are listening right now, where somebody says to you, have you got 5 minutes so I can give you some feedback?
Oh yeah, the warming up question.
What's your reaction? Yeah. Yeah. What are you starting to think?
Yeah. Oh shit. What
That's
have
my
I done?
question to you, Julia. What are you starting to think when somebody says that?
Yeah, oh shit, what have I done wrong?
Right? Because we've got this internal, no, I don't have 5 minutes. Yeah, very funny, Nosh. So we've got this internal kind of negative bias where we go, oh, something bad's going to happen. They're going to give me information that I'm not going to enjoy. And so we associate feedback with being on guard. Okay, I've got to get my protective mechanisms up. So, you know, if I'm a flighter, I just want to avoid and do a runner and shut down and do yes, no answers and maybe do a bit of passive agreement. So, yep, sure, no worries, just so I can get out of there. If I'm a fighter, I need to win. So I'm going to get defensive, I might get aggressive, I might push back, I might make things personal. So either way, for me, when I fall trap into those, or when I see other people fall trap into those reactions, that just tells me that they're stressed or anxious about information that's coming their way, or information that they think is coming their way. But I got a theory about it all. You ready? You want to hear my theory?
Yep, go for it.
I reckon feedback becomes an identity issue for us, because a lot of the time we wrap our identity or our sense of self in other people's perceptions of us. So I've got too much weight on, I've got not enough on, I am, you know, too intimidating, or I'm not strong enough, or my parenting is really poor, so therefore I'm really poor, or how I'm in a relationship, you know, I could be better, so therefore if they give me feedback around how I can be a better partner, a better lover, a better mother, a better father, then that goes to the core of who I believe I am. And so when we get feedback, for us, it can feel really raw, because it shapes how we believe it can reshape how we believe we are, because sometimes it's information that is very different to how we feel like we're coming across, or how we feel we are, which means that we can start taking things personally. And rather than seeing it as a learning opportunity to go, okay, maybe there's some data in there, maybe there's some information in there that can be useful, and we get to choose around what's useful and what's not. So just like we can pick a cup up or a pen up from the table, we can also choose to put the pen down. And we can do the same with feedback, rather than falling into these kind of fight or flight reactions. But because we're all a little bit cray-cray, and we have this need to compare ourselves to each other. And I'm not saying I don't do it, you know, like we all do it. So I haven't reached enlightenment. I haven't reached the phase where I am completely okay with where I am. I'm becoming more and more flawsome, but I'm learning to see my reactions in things of when I am stressed and anxious. Because for me, that's like, oh, there's something to explore there, because I can get the opportunity to learn about myself. Maybe not in the moment, because I'm busy being stressed, but after that would be really useful. So, you know, you asked me the question, you know, is it a bad thing, you know, or why are we poor at receiving it? Because we're human, and because we haven't yet learned to make peace with the whole of ourselves, with the good and the bad.
Yes, it works at a management level as well. Like, I'm sure all of us have been on the receiving end of, you know, feedback that maybe isn't meaningful or isn't honest or isn't constructive, and there might be many reasons why our managers or whoever we're having that conversation with isn't in a place to give, you know, positive or constructive feedback. But what are the drivers, or how can managers understand where maybe some of their flaws are to make them better feedback givers and receivers themselves?
Yeah. So we've kind of got two pieces to this. So the question is, how can managers be aware of how they're coming across, or not just managers, just people in general? So how can their flaws influence the way that they give feedback? There's kind of a couple of things. One is we've got these fears around why we don't give feedback to people. So think about it for you guys who are listening, some of the main reasons around why you might not give feedback to other people, whether it's your partner, your children, people you work with, whoever, would be, the main one is fear of damaging the relationship. So I don't want to give them feedback because what we've got going on is good, or it's not good and I don't want it to get worse. We also have this fear of conflict. So we don't have a relationship to understand what healthy conflict looks like and how we need to get there, or we're worried that we could get it wrong, or we're fearful of the emotional reactions of other people. So their fight or flight reactions. And yes, you're right, Nosh, the assumption that the other person won't take it well because we've made up a story that they're going to respond poorly. So we've got all these reasons around why we don't give it. But what we haven't looked at as much is how we're wired and the impact that has on other people. So I don't know about you, but my brother and I, James, he's my younger brother. He hates me reminding him that. I call him Lil Jum, hates it. He'll also hate the fact that I've just spread that out to the world. But that's okay, he won't listen. So James and I grew up in this like highly organized family. So we had lists for everything. Mum had a list for shopping. She had a list for jobs to do. Dad had the same. And we were also the family that was on time for everything. Like we're the family that's at the airport 3 hours before the domestic flights. We're the family that's sitting at the front of, functions half an hour before it's going to start. So we are so organized, it's ridiculous. So if you get a present, we were taught that you got to call them or write a thank you note within 24 hours. So, you don't hand your schoolwork in late. So that was drummed into us. So I had this expectation when I started work that people would be organized and that they'd call you back and that they'd thank you for stuff that you gave them. But it's kind of not how we roll these days. It's a dying art, this whole, how we get back to people. And so I thought I would give feedback based on that, based on how I'm wired, and let people know that that's a flaw for them. But I don't know, is maybe my old school ways getting in the way of how we roll these days, and is it important? I was also taught that that if you want to share your opinions, I was taught that you need to share your opinions and your feelings, no matter what, no matter the cost, no matter the impact. And so when people at work didn't speak up, or they didn't share their ideas or their opinions, I'd get frustrated and I'd tell myself that they're not committed. So all my beliefs, all my wiring spills onto other people and the feedback that I give them, because how we're wired and what we believe impacts the conversations that we have with other people. But I'll give you an example on the flip side. So one of the things that I'm not good at is taking all the information in and pondering things over time. I am basically not good at slowing down and considering things. Now, Julia, I know you will be so surprised by that. It will be like a game changer for you.
Totally
shocked. Yeah, totally shocked. So I can rush into decisions. So if I know that about myself, then how can I give feedback to somebody else about that? Because that's my flaw. How can I have a conversation with them about that if I know that I do it? So that can hold me back from stepping into a space. So if you know that you're not somebody who is on time and you want to give feedback to somebody else who is a bit got some timeliness issues, that could hold you back. So the things that we're good at and the things that we're poor at, or the beliefs that we have, will always spill out into the conversations that we have with other people. And I tend to call them the board of directors that live in our head. We've all got these little board of directors that shape and rewire how we see things. So there was this guy called Dr. Aaron Beck, and in 1972 he coined the phrase cognitive distortions. So he was the one that basically came up with that whole concept of cognitive behavior therapy. So been revolutionary. But the thing that, and there's 52 of them, there's 52 ways that we can distort information based on how we're wired. But so, you know, if you're wondering why we're all a bit skewed, it's because we are. But some of the main things are that can get in the way of how we see information is that we're either a black and white thinker. It's good or it's bad. It's yes or it's no. Or we might fall trap to being a perfectionist. So unless it's perfect or unless I'm perfect, I'm not good enough, or it's not good enough. Or we might have one of the board of director that we catastrophize things and we make things bigger and more dramatic than they need to be. Or we minimize things and make them smaller than they need to be. There's basically, from a board of, you're a recovering perfectionist, Sarah, love it. So I'm a recovering always righty, because an always righty is one of the board of directors that can live in your head. And the thing about being an always righty is that it's a big blind spot. And why? Because you're always right. So they're just wrong and they just need to do things my way. And that's what I was taught in the Murch house. Just be strong, stand on your opinion. So we spend all this time, unless we're aware of this stuff and how it impacts, it will come out in our language and it will come out in how we see people and it will come out in how we interact with people and ourselves. So it's really important that we look at all these pieces and start understanding ourselves, because this can get in the way of the feedback that we give others, because we're not as open-minded or open-hearted to people being different from how we think or how we feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And I completely get where you're coming from about rushing into things, because I'm almost known for the opposite. And 20 years of managing projects, and things need to be well thought through before you, you even start. That was sort of the culture that I grew up in, and both my parents were in the military, so it was very regimented. What's the plan? Where are we going? And step and step and step. And then when I did VID last year and I stood it up in 3 days, people are like, where did that come from? Like, there was no plan, or it was a very short, short plan. But it's interesting how, like you say, I hadn't been aware of maybe some of those just intrinsic things that made me who I was, in the same way that you're talking about. But in the concept of what that means in terms of how we're seen as, authenticity is a big leadership word at the moment. We need to be more authentic at work. We need to lead authentically. What does Flawsome mean in the context of being more authentic?
Oh, it's so connected. So being Flawsome really is making peace with all of you. But there's this concept called the Pratfall Effect. Have you heard of that before?
Nope.
Okay, so basically it means that that when you make a mistake, not all the time, but when you make a mistake and you're really open and honest about it, that people are more drawn to you. So in fact, the research goes as far to say that you become more trustworthy. So avoiding making mistakes or being perfect or hiding who you really are makes you more unrelatable to others. And so for me, that was like that was fantastic, because what it's saying is the more honest I am with myself and with others, the more I get to build trust and the more I get to build relationships with other people. And I remember in 2008 when I was working at Nous, a management consulting firm, and it was our last financial crisis. And Tim Orton, the MD, who's just a remarkable human and an amazing leader, he basically called together the leadership team because everything was shutting down. We were losing work by the minute, and we were kind of having to go, what do we do here? Are we going to lay people off? Are we going to change how we do things? And he had this meeting with us, and he basically said, I haven't been in this situation before and I don't know how to move forward from here. But what I do know is that we are highly likely to work it out together. So we're going to spend this time identifying what our next moves are. And I remember sitting back, because we were all looking at each other, because, this guy's a Rhodes Scholar. He is so super clever. And yet he was saying he didn't have the answer. And for us, we were like, oh my God, I love you as a leader even more because you're showing your authenticity, you're showing your honesty. And if authentic is just being real, then Flawsome is exactly that. It's showing yourself with all your holes, but it's not walking around going, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that. It's about taking responsibility for all of you. I remember I was on this doing this radio interview a couple of weeks ago. It was like a pre-recorded one, and the guy on ABC was asking me this question, and halfway through the question I forgot what I was answering. So I said to him, oh my God, shit, sorry. Oh shit, I said shit. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just forgot what we were talking about, and I just got on this rant. And he goes, oh, that's okay, we'll edit it out. I went, no, let's not edit it out, because this is exactly the thing that we need to show each other, that we are full of flaws and that we do make mistakes, and that's completely okay. So, and at the end of the interview, we got so much feedback at the end about how they loved it and loved the realness. And I think that we've lost the art of doing that. And, you know, we hear workplaces say, bring your whole selves to work. We want you to bring your whole selves. It's like all of you in all your finest. But I don't think workplaces are really wired for this. Yeah, right, exactly. But I don't think workplaces are really wired for this. They still want people to conform to their way of doing things. And, you know, so that people will fail. And, oh, yeah, but don't fail, not if it's going to cost us. So the kind of whole being authentic isn't an excuse to go, well, that's who I am, bad luck, I'm not good at that. It's about taking responsibility again for the ripple effect of who you are and choosing to evolve at the same time. So it's about having, and essentially that requires quite a lot of courage. It does require quite a lot of courage to go, oh my God, I can be intimidating, and oh my God, I can be passive aggressive, or I do avoid, or I do run away from difficult things. So it's not about saying that's who I am. It's about saying I'm going to take responsibility for that and try and understand that more, and we'll do that together. But I won't hide stuff from you, and I won't hide stuff from me.
Yeah, I had a leader a few years ago now. I was running a large tech project, and he didn't have a technical bone. The sponsor of the project didn't have a technical bone in his body. And we had a couple of steering committee meetings for the whole team to come together to sort of report on progress. And he was really quiet. And so we had a chat afterwards, and he goes, I'm not understanding half of what they're saying. I was like, and I said, okay, what can we do? What can we do differently? But I also said, but his feedback was, I don't know I need someone to help me explain. And it's like, yeah, but you also need to, the meeting is there so you can ask questions. Right? No one's going to think differently of you if you say, I don't know what that acronym means, or, you know, can we take 15 minutes offline so you can explain this to me in more detail, or I have no idea what it is that you just said. As soon as he started to say those things, the team was suddenly so much more engaged, because, as you said, it showed that he was interested, and he was actually being more.
And chances are he's asking the question that everybody else wants to ask, but they're just scared to ask. So there's all like
3-letter acronyms, right? Like, I didn't know that's what that meant.
Yeah. I love it when somebody goes, I'm really sorry, but I don't understand. I'm like, thank you. I didn't either.
So how can we start building some of these concepts into, you know, who we are and our workplace?
Yeah. So how do we get our Flawsome on? So there's three things. Like, if we we're going to kind of simplify it down, I think the first piece is understanding your triggers. So understand the things about work, life, people that impact how you respond in the moment to other people and to yourself. So that's the first piece. And there's typically there's a whole lot of triggers, but I reckon there's 6 triggers that are typically the most common ones at work. And when we understand that, we are now starting to take responsibility for, okay, that's why I cracked it. That's why I got upset. That's why I wanted to walk away. So when we're aware of those 6 triggers, it becomes a bit of a game changer for us. But if we don't want to own them, if we don't have the courage to own them, then we can't self-evolve. So that first piece of self-evolution requires quite a lot of work. So, and when we understand our triggers, we're moving away from blaming other people for triggering us, or blaming ourselves, going like, you know, where we do that whole self-flagellation and I should have done better and I should have known, and, you know, that keeps us trapped. Or denial, which is we just get, and so we're choosing to stay in our conscious, not our subconscious. Whole nother conversation. So understand your triggers. Awesome. Easier to deal with, easy to disagree with. Great. The second piece is that we sort of move into understanding the truth. So when we really want to understand a circumstance for its whole entirety, so we're in a meeting and somebody's got an opinion that's different to us, or we're at a dinner party and someone's talking how we roll out COVID, or Trump, or Brexit, or climate change, or religion, just a few big ticket items. Instead of getting into defense or shutting down, get curious. Understand where they're coming from. Ask lots of questions. Know that you're being triggered, and the minute you're being triggered, you stop listening. So searching for the real truth in circumstances is a combination of what you know to be true, plus you and you and you and you and you, and that's when you build your pool of knowledge. You don't have to agree, you don't have to disagree, but it's a really amazing space that instead of falling trapped to our triggers, we actually go, oh, I'm going to learn here. And we never learn by speaking. We learn by listening. So that's kind of the second piece of searching for the truth, where we get our curiosity on. And the third piece is really what is you've been part of how many projects where you're going for a transformation of the organization, you know, over time, because you know, project management was your baby, or is your baby. And so I think one of the reasons why we don't transform as humans is that we don't pick our pain. And it's kind of the pain of growth, the pain of acknowledging that I am not perfect. I am full of flaws. I do have a ripple effect that isn't always awesome, because that can be really painful, because it's like a wound into our identity. So once we acknowledge that, then we can actually start moving forward in it. So that's the pain of growth. Or there's the pain of staying the same, of getting trapped in resentment, getting trapped in offense, getting trapped in avoidance, getting trapped in the emotional roller coasters that we go on, or blame. And we stay in stress and we stay in anxiety because we don't choose to evolve and transform over time. But I don't reckon transformation, it's like baby steps. It's one little learning at a time. It's not, you know, you don't need trauma, and, you know, we don't need trauma to evolve. We just need little aha moments at the time so that we can go on the journey, go on the Flawsome journey. I reckon.
Yeah, no, totally. There's a couple of questions in the chat that I want to dive into it in a second. But I find this whole thing fascinating, because there's certainly, having been in corporate for so long, where this whole perfection, need to know the answers to all of the questions. You know, if you're working in that sort of environment, or it's sounding very familiar to you, how do you work with organizations and people day to day to sort of share this message?
As in perfectionists, or just people in general?
Or people in general, but I know a lot of people that I think have flaws, or
everyone.
has flaws, myself included. I
Everyone.
was trying to be polite, but anyway, let me just roll with
Okay,
with
we're
that.
all a little bit effed up,
Everyone has
Julia.
flaws.
Let's be clear, we're all a little bit broken.
Yes, we are all a little bit broken. How do you help people day to day? So we've got Flawsome the book, but does that translate into, coaching or speaking or,
Oh, okay. So how do
helping
I
people with
help?
their
Okay,
culture
cool.
or?
Okay, yeah, cool. So as far as the stuff that I do, I tend to work with teams or organizations that want to evolve into either improve their leadership. So, and I reckon you can do heaps. Go to business school or Harvard or whatever for a few days, but it doesn't really transform you. I reckon we need to do the work on ourselves. So whenever I'm running leadership programs and they go, oh, that's great, how can I evolve and transform? And go and do some freaking counseling. Go and work on yourself. So the whole Flawsome journey is really doing the work on yourself. So we run programs on doing that around how we elevate our leadership. Or we run programs on how we respond to feedback in the moment through Flawsome. Obviously, there's stuff around how do we give feedback as well, but the Flawsome journey is different. And we tend to work with, the exec team to go too, because we don't want more people doing the talking leadership. We want people doing the walking leadership. So how do we get them to do that and to start taking responsibility for how they react in moments? But it can also be done in intact teams too, because when you've got people who are learning that they're wired differently and that they get triggered by different things, and then to go and search for the truth in situations and get more curious, it's a game changer for high performance. So these are some of the principles that we can learn to do in the everyday. And yeah, I'd speak about it ad nauseum until you've had enough.
What I love about it is that Flawsome's fun. Right? And I think to go full circle back to where we started, where feedback's not often seen as a fun conversation, Flawsome is actually a fun conversation. Like if someone said, like I know that I'm super organized. If someone says it someone says that to me, I go, oh my God, yes. Like it's my strength, but oh my God, can it be my weakness at the same time, right? And I laugh at myself. I asked my husband what we're having for dinner this on Saturday before it's even Monday. I'm that sort of, I'm always thinking like a week ahead, because I like to sort of, if I know roughly what it looks like, it gives me space to do other things. But to him, it translates as, right. Do you have to organize everything? Why can't you just decide what you want to eat on what we're going to do for dinner?
Why can't you go with the flow? Why can't you go with the flow?
Yeah, well, it is, but it's just like you said, it's that sort of ingrained, just the way I've been brought up. But I can laugh at that now because it's a flaw, but it's who makes me me.
Yeah. Otherwise, you wouldn't be you.
Yeah. And other people have said, "Oh, you're always, safe pair of hands and so calm and relaxed," to the point where I can come across as quite sort of level-headed. I have a lot of emotions one way or the other. And it's like, yeah, but I've been paid for 20 years to be this very stable sort of in control. It's all good, not too like you don't go to many steering committees where you get to be happy. Like it's a very factual, controlled conversation. So it's sort of actually just getting used to or understanding that's who you are, and but also laughing at some of it as well, and going, actually, I should be.
Yeah, it's giving yourself permission to be you, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's giving yourself permission to be who you are. Yeah.
No, absolutely. One of the questions that came through in the chat was from the wonderful Nosh. Nosh asked about, is Flawsome equal to being vulnerable?
I think it's completely both. So, because Flawsome, I think initially it requires an element of vulnerability to yourself to go, yeah, I am that, and I am taking off all my filters, and I'm going to see myself for who I am, and that requires vulnerability. But then when you get used to going on that journey, it doesn't feel vulnerable, it feels normal. So, because initially you have all these fears around going, oh, I'm not great at this, and I'm this person, and I might be an even keel, and oh, maybe that's, and so initially it requires a level of vulnerability, but I think that ultimately becomes a normal way of doing things. And Brene Brown's done an awesome job of normalizing this. And, you know, we spend so much time hiding our true selves, not just from other people, but from ourselves. So that's always the first step until it becomes a part of how we operate.
What do you do in, like you've mentioned some of your flaws, and I love that you are that transparent and going, hey, I'm not perfect, I've got some of these these crazy things to work on as well. And how does that show up for you every day? Like, is there a daily habit that you have, or, you know, do you journal or reflect on things that come up every day? Because it's a constant cycle, isn't it, of feedback, as you said.
Yeah. I always have somebody in my world that I pay for to help me evolve professionally or personally. So, and based on your own growth and evolution, sometimes you grow out of them. So, but I always have somebody that can help me self-reflect. So I find that really important. Yes, my personal practices are game changers. So the more time I spend being with me, without distractions, in meditating and understanding myself, the easier it is for me to see how I'm showing up in myself and with others. My yoga practice is massive for me as well. So it's certainly a mental and spiritual game changer. And journaling is definitely a huge part of my day as well. So Sarah Blondin, who's one of my favourite people that I'm listening to meditation practice wise at the moment, she's just so divine. She's this Canadian, and the voice just like sends you into this, oh, I'm so loved. But she talks about journaling where, oh, we're just having a dog explosion out the front of my house right now. She talks about in journaling, just write it down for 10 minutes nonstop. And I've found that practice just in the last month even super helpful, because I'm not getting trapped in my thoughts. I'm just getting everything out. And so when I look at those practices, the minute I drop on some of them, I'm not as present. I'm not as able to see stuff. And then I can fall trap to my own personal blame or blame of others. So yeah, all of that stuff does make a really big difference.
Yeah, I know through some of the conversations we had yesterday. So we had Donna McGeorge yesterday talking about, you know, finding capacity in our day to work on, you know, being more effective. It's actually counterintuitive. If we make space for things, we will, you know, we'll achieve more, because we're doing some of that inner work, you know, that makes the remaining 85% better just by investing that bit of time. And then also we also had Oscar on, Oscar Trimboli on late last night, where he was talking about listening and also just sort of listening to self. And it was a really nice segue from his session into yours about how do you actually just sit with some of what you're either hearing yourself say or hearing what others say as well. We've probably got time for one or two questions. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. While you're doing that, if you want to head to Georgia's website to grab Flawsome, it's available there. It's also available on all of the main bookstores. Georgia, it's a wonderful read. It's sitting on my bedside table, so every time I wake up in the morning, your picture's staring up at me saying Flawsome, and I'm really enjoying reading it. And certainly have laughed at a few parts of it as well, gone, oh shit, yeah, that is me. I have done. You're talking about me. How does Georgia know that I do these things? So I do feel like you're talking to me through the camera.
Love it.
And you know, Nosh has also dropped a recommendation in there as well. And Georgia, if there's anywhere else that people need to find you, is everything through the website? You're happy for people to connect with you on LinkedIn, reach out to you?
All of the above. Yeah, you'll find me. Perfect.
So in the spirit of giving great feedback, if you could fill the chat with wonderful feedback for Georgia Murch, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk through Flawsome with you. And Nosh is saying he loves you.
I love you back, Nosh. One of my number one supporters.